Hey, what's up, guys? Alex here. So today we'll be going over the Endgame puzzle. This time we're doing the four empty squares for this episode. And so I have the Othello Quest at launch at four empty squares dash one, which means the first half of the four empty squares puzzle available. So let's, with increasing number of empty squares available, that sort of increases the complexity of the puzzle. So definitely let's see, how many puzzles we can cover for today. So let's take a look at this puzzle number one out of 257 available puzzles within the Othello Quest application. So right now it's White's turn to play, if you notice. So usually in the natural progression of the game, you would expect for White's turn to play to have an odd number of squares, but in this case, a pass of move must have occurred before this, whether is it intentionally or unintentionally by black or white. Basically, this is the situation that we're dealt with. So over here, we do notice that we don't have parity for white because it's just a four square region to play to, and we have three choices. So as the number of empty squares increases, as we kind of move up the ladder of complexity for endgame puzzles, we must again consider logical sequences rather than counting it out immediately, because you have to make the correct assumptions of your opponent's response before you can actually count a line accurately. Because if you were to play a move and think that maybe black will play somewhere else incorrectly, and then you would have that wrong assumption to go with. So let's consider our options over here. We have A2, we have B1, and B2. So essentially, in this situation, if we just look at this situation and try to identify White's strength in the endgame position, we basically have a very strong backing on the seventh row, which is kind of like layered above the eighth row of black. So in essence, the bottom tends to be a little bit of a strength for white. And at the same time, we also have the right edge, most of the right edge at least. So we have a strong backing from right to left as well. So before you actually consider or approach an endgame, you want to kind of like just observe the situation on the board if you have the time. Kind of understand what's your strength and versus your opponent's strength. So one of the immediate strength that you can observe for black is actually this top right black disc, that black has a corner over here. So over here along the first row, it could potentially be quite strong for black. So let's say if we were to start with B1, and given that we do not have parity, it would not be probably too ideal to immediately play B1 and allow him to sweep back the top row and kind of lose parity following that. That could be one concern. And also, black has this left edge and the bottom edge nestled. So maybe if we were to consider playing the X square over here, it's not too great in general, and especially when you don't have parity and you're playing into an even square region, the general guideline is that you probably don't want to play the X square, because what happens if we play B2, and given that this entire row, the second row is white, black can easily just play to a quiet A2 in response. So you have white, black, and then white basically only has one option over there, and we have to play B2, and finally black takes a clean sweep. So working with that assumption, we can actually roughly count out the lines. So over here, if white were to start off, we'll start counting with the first line that we talked about, with white starting at B1 basically. So right now we have 30 white discs. If we were to play B1, we would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 discs in total, and the count would become 36. And black would take the entire sweep down. We would still be left with 30 discs. And of course, given the white-black sequence, we have an option to have 30 discs and to play to maybe, let's say we were to play the A2, and for black to finish the move with B2, it would be 31, 2, and then black takes back one disc, and we end up losing 31 to 33. So if we were to go from white, black, and white over here, we get 31, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We get 37 discs, but in return, when black finally plays to A2 in response to our B2, we would actually minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This has changed to white because of the B2 move. So essentially, we would actually play out to a draw. So the best result of starting with B1 essentially is a draw. So we're definitely looking for a win considering this is an endgame puzzle. So let's take a look at X square. The X square option, if we were to play this, we get 31, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 37 white discs. And then finally, when black plays this, we minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is white already. So we have 32 discs left. And when we play to the only option that we have at B1, we have 30. We basically have 37 minus 5, 32, and then we have 33, 4, 5, 6, 7, 37. And finally, when black takes the corner, we lose another 6 discs and we are left with 31 discs. So this is the best result, is a draw line on the top of B1. And then, of course, if we were to go B2, it's definitely a guaranteed loss of minus 2. So obviously, by rule of elimination, you would then be able to kind of like conclude that, given that this is a puzzle, A2 would be your best option. But A2, that is a puzzle. But then let's say if this were a real game, you would probably want to count out the sequence as well. So if A2, we were to play A2, obviously black would have two options, either to take the corner or to take the X square to B2. So let's count that out. 30 white discs, we have 31, and 2 if we were to start off with A2, 31, 2. So we have 32, and if black were to take the corner, we lose 1 disc and we end up with 31. And obviously, after black has established the corner, it is now safe to play a move such as B1 to actually take control of the inner row and basically nullify the effects of these two corners. So if we start off with A2, we have 31, 2, minus 1, 31. And then when we play to B1, we get 31, and then plus 1, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. Given that we have control on the second row over here, black's move over here to B2 in the final move will only remove 1 disc back. So we would end up with 36 discs. And that's a win for us. So let's say if black doesn't take the corner, if we go 31 and 2, we lose 1 disc. If black takes B2, we would left with 31 discs. And obviously, we would weigh between these two options. And if we were to just consider just taking the corner, given that it's our choice, we would have 31 plus 2 plus 1 over here. So we get 32, 3, 4, 5, 6. We get 36 discs. And in return, black would just finish off the game with B1 being the best option, the only option for him, so that would leave us with 35 discs. So considering that line, either way, we would actually guarantee at least 35 discs and definitely a win. Of course, if you count the other option, we would probably either be the same or we improve on it. If not, we would just stick to the corner option. So let's start out with A2, given that we've counted that line, and black basically goes for the best, which is the X square over here. So now that we've kind of convinced ourselves from a 4 empty square point of view into a 2 empty square best situation for us, we have the win in the bag already, given that we already know that from the corner right now we have 31 white discs. If we were to take this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discs and plus 5 minus 1 over here. So essentially we have secured a win with at least 35 discs plus 6 over here. So if we do have the time to actually count, we would count the other option as well. So plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, minus 8 for black in return for the corner. So this gives us a total aggregate of plus 3 over here, but this is actually just plus 0. So obviously let's go for plus 3. So finally, we make that last move to the corner and we complete the puzzle and we win with a score line of 35 to 29. So, yeah, hopefully if you guys are okay with that, we can move on to the next puzzle. If not, you can just go over what I've mentioned earlier again and again and, basically just kind of try to figure out and try to rationalize it intuitively for yourself. Let's move on to the next puzzle. Okay, yeah. So this is puzzle number 2, and right now it's black's turn to play. And again, you realize that we do face that situation of not having parity. So obviously for this game, there wasn't a pass and move, most likely, I guess. So in this case, we have four empties, and it's black's turn to play, and we basically have no parity. So in this situation, we have three options. And of course, if we were to immediately choose any of the bottom options, it would probably not be too ideal because what we want to do is actually count out the simplest line in the end game so that you can kind of secure your win. So, given this situation, what I would do is immediately count out starting with H3 because H3 basically gives white only one response in retaliation to that move on H3. So the only option that white can respond to is G2. So it's a lot easier to just count out the line that is most straightforward as long as you count it correctly. So right now you have 30 black this. If we take 31, 32, that would be 32 black this, and white has to respond here. So we minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 black this. So we're basically left with 24, which gives us 24 discs. And if we were to consider the option which is most likely more number of discs, which is H7, we essentially get 24 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that will be 31. And finally, when white plays the corner, we lose one disc. So if we were to play this, most likely we lose by at least 4 discs. So that's probably not what we want to do at this point in time. So another line that we have to consider. So given that we've already established that this is a lost line, we wouldn't want to consider this anymore, but we want to turn our focus to these two squares instead. So naturally, you probably wouldn't want to give up the corner to some extent in this point of view. So maybe you kind of want to count the corner line first. So let's say we were to capture the corner right now. We would have 31, 32, 33, 34 discs. So the first easiest way to count out is to actually just count this one in response for white, the nearest one. That's usually a natural response. So if we were to count 31, 2, 3, 4 minus 1 by white playing here, we have 33. And we take over here 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. So black, that's 34 minus 1, 33. And then we have 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. 39, finally, we lose 6 discs over here. We get 33 to 31. So that's a win for us, which is fine if white were to respond this way. But we also have to consider the other two options that white might respond further. So if black were to go here and white were not to play here, let's consider what happens if white were to go to H3 instead. So it wouldn't make sense for white to consider G2 because that would give us both tempo. If black goes here, white goes here, we get both H7 and followed by H3, which should be a comfortable win for us either way because if you just count it out, you have 31, 2, 3, 4, and then when you minus 1, that would give you 33. Sorry, 31, 2, 3, 4, and if white were to play here, we basically lose 3 discs, and that would be 31. And sorry, if white were to play here actually. So what we were talking about was actually considering the fact that we want to go to the corner, 34 black discs, and we were to lose 5 discs over here, we would have 29. And the last two moves given that is ours, 29 plus 1, 2, that would be 31. And when we make the last move over here due to a swindle, we would easily win the game with more than 33 discs. So considering that sequence wouldn't be logical, but rather what you want to consider is H8 followed by H3. So let's count it out. 31, 2, 3, 4. And if white were to play here, we basically have 31 discs remaining. And let's just consider grabbing the edge. So that would be 34 minus 1, 31. And then 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. After we grab this, 37 on H7, we lose another 3 discs. So we are guaranteed almost like a win of at least 4 discs margin. And of course, the other sequence would be bad for white. So essentially, the corner is almost guaranteed a win for sure. So what happens if we were to play consider h7. So if we did h7, 1, 2, 3, 4, we would have 34, and if white would have just kind of respond with the corner, we would lose 2 discs, and consequently we have 32, and we will be forced to actually play h3, which gives us 33, 34, and finally we lose 6 discs, so that would give us -8 score line. So definitely, if we consider this situation here, it's important to actually establish that we want to play into the corner, since we've counted those lines. So right now, white has responded in the best possible way, definitely, because this is a puzzle. And so we only have one choice over here, and since we've counted that line, we're comfortable with playing that move, and finally, we win with a score line of 33 to 31. So this one is, probably definitely hard to count out 4 empty squares exactly for all lines, but if you kind of establish a logical sequence to things, then that will be fine. So let's move on to the third puzzle today before we wrap up the video. So let's move on. Okay, so in this situation, this should be probably easy to count as well, since this is black's turn to play, and essentially you have this kind of floating square over here for white to consider, but before that you want to consider whether you want to block that line. So obviously, when you count the endgame lines, always choose the simplest line to count first to kind of determine whether you are able to secure the win. So in this case, I have 21 black discs. I want to count by blocking white's move first over here. So if I were to take this, I would get 21 like this, 22, 23, 24, and it will be a pass of move because white cannot play into the top left. So with 24 black discs, I'm going to advance and play the corner. Even though I do not have parity in this even region, what I don't want to do is play any of the x square or c square and give up the corner, but rather we want to establish the corner. So we have 21, 2, 3, 4. We have another 24 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 30 discs, and weighing this cut and this cut, this would be a +6 minus 2, and this would be a +5 minus 1. Both essentially gives us the same aggregate score, but usually, intuitively, we would consider the c square cut out first, because it's just a lot simpler to count, because it only gives white one white disc in return. So we have 21, 2, 3, 4, 25, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 30. So basically 31, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 36 black discs after making that sequence 1, 2, 3. And then finally, when white takes that move back, essentially we would win with a score line of 35. So I think for this particular puzzle, there isn't a need to actually just reconsider any other sequences, because if you were to play the corner first, you allow white to actually just consolidate and take 2 more discs over here, which is not what you want to do. Because ultimately, when you play black and white takes this, all you get is just the same sequence in taking a diagonal cut, and white returns with this move. So obviously, if you can block it first, why not go ahead and block it? And that would only serve to benefit you, given that you've weighed both scenarios. So let's jump into this. And then, obviously, we've counted a line, so we'll get the corner, and then this is +5 minus 1, giving you an aggregate of +4. And of course, this is +6 minus 2 over here. So if you can't visualize quickly, always just kind of go back and just visualize. So you have +1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 over here for black. If black would have started off with B2, and white would flip back 1 and 2, so that would be +6 minus 2, and this is +5 minus 1. Okay, so let's just go with the simple approach, and basically we win with a score line of +6 against our opponent. So so that's basically it, the first 3 puzzles of the 4 empty squares. So hopefully, with this increase in complexity of the end game, it doesn't baffle you too much. If it does, feel free to go back and just review it slowly, one by one, and just kind of like understand the logic in that sequence established. So thank you very much for joining me in this episode, and I'll see you at the next one. See you. Bye.